designers develop over time. And like you can look back at Lee, or you can look back at Marc Jacobs, or anyone that's sort of had this longer time to grow, and you can see all these little seeds kind of growing and developing. So I think like at their best, fashion shows do show us this. There are these moments in time. You can see this kind of idea evolving, because we're trying to, I don't want to be super negative about them. This is what we were sort of talking about. But how they,
negative about things? Surely not.
I mean, I just think there's so much, they could do so much better. A lot of the time you just feel like it's a missed opportunity. Like, you know, why don't we get that?
One issue that I see happening a lot is like, it's not only in fashion shows, it's kind of a general issue identifies. We are worried too much about the next thing. Like, we are scared about something, we are scared about something change its format, so we want to keep it so much the way it is, but at the same time we don't pay the attention the moment it happens, we kind of rush into the next one. So I think this is like, even like now with the new media and the new ways that people communicate, we get so scared about this, and instead of embracing it and using it in a creative way, we kind of skip it by our stress and worry.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this kind of miss a lot of storytelling opportunities and a lot of experience opportunities for fashion shows as well.
No, I like that. I love that idea.
Do we think fashion shows, as we know them, are on the way out? What do we say to that?
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so
there's
either.
something really important about a fashion show. I think it ticks so many boxes. The content that we all love and crave these days is quite easily created. You know, the beauty brands can do all of the backstage stuff, so that's a bit of sponsorship ticked off. Model agencies get stuff of their own models and stuff backstage, they get that. Casting directors are all now experts on Instagram and stuff, and I think that's really important. And then the stuff that you can share is amazing. It's just the way that we do these shows, maybe there's a better way.
But I think you're right. I think if you look at the history, coming back again to how they've evolved, they are evolving, they have evolved, they haven't always been like they are now. And I think they're going to continue to evolve. So I don't think, I think they'll continue to change. I don't know that they'll stop. Because also when we saw, during COVID, when we saw the highly produced kind of video versions of the shows, some of those were amazing. Some of those not so much. And I don't know that everybody, I'm sure there are some...
They're not going to be able to flip in a season.
They're not going to be able to flip in a season. And I just don't know if it's as easy to engage in those.
I'm not sure. I know you two love shows. I'm not. I love shows. I don't physically like going to them because of blah. But also, I'm not sure. I think a lot of the young designers are really conscious about the state of the planet and not wanting to jump on that bandwagon.
Yeah.
And I saw when we did Fantastic Toiles here, and their drop felt a lot more now than sitting in another front row and watching a bunch of models go up and down in a straight line, which I've seen ever since I've been doing fashion shows.
Yeah.
So it didn't feel new, and the whole thing about fashion is supposed to feel new.
Yeah.
And so I'm not convinced. I think you've got a set of designers who are incredibly anxious and worried in this very, very serious way about what we're doing to the planet, partly with fashion. And also you've got new technologies like AI coming in and avatars and all those sorts of things. They're two incredibly powerful forces. If fashion sort of infiltrates the game industry, which is massive and full of money, that will really change how things are. So I'm not convinced that, if I was putting my money on where the fashion shows would go on, I don't think they will. And just because we like them, it doesn't...
I think they're definitely going to evolve.
I'd much rather have like 6 people in a room. I'd much rather have just to see the clothes without the fuss. So when I say I like a fashion show, I'm not really into those big productions that have the front row and that have the celebrity attendance and I just want to see. But the thing is, if it were up to me, I'd like to just see 5 shows. I don't want to see like 165.
Is that what you had to do?
I'm picking a number out of thin air, but it felt like I had to see a lot of shows. And at that point, you stop seeing them anyway. You tune it out. You don't. It's not.
No, it's really because when I used to go and see Martin Sidboy, Gemmoto, and one other one. Yeah. So I was like, it's just like tourism. But I get a bit. I'm not good in the crowd. So I'm not good sitting there thinking, oh my God.
It wasn't so much, when I was full-time on a magazine, when I did Arena and Arena 1 Plus, it wasn't so much about loving going to shows. It was actually I could do a lot of business at a show. If I could see a photographer, I know they like,
but the editors for
and they like
You're making
if they
deals.
like to
It's a
collect, and I'd be
deal-making
like,
situation.
did you like that? Do you want to shoot that? Like it was quite an instant thing, and you'd see other people about doing collaborations and stuff. You'd see new models.
Yeah.
You'd see casting directors. So
That's a big part of it.
actually, I was constantly working, like prepping an issue, thinking this is going to be great. I want an exclusive on that. Grabbing a PR, and then so we all did a lot. So there's a lot of business that happens at shows as well at the same time.
I'm sure you've got lots of super kind of, important in that way, useful to you people.
Yeah.
That you need to get through. It's easier than trying to get on a phone or an email.
Yeah, because you could get them in front of you.
Just too much stuff, isn't there? There's just too much stuff. It could be edited, it could be cleaned up. We could all be a bit more thoughtful about the way we, put things together. Employ somebody and give them that role. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The cut down officer. Like
The editor.
I think it's the curator, no? It's like I see the emergence of platforms that curate a few pieces for selected designers, or even like pop-up events that curate some pieces. And I think that becomes a much more powerful experience against having all the t-shirts and all kind of colors. But I would say, like, for me, from coming from digital, unfortunately, this is something that became very much in the digital area as well. So I had a chat with a really nice friend. She works in LCF, teaching there, and after a huge, overwhelming period of over the last, I think, 10 months in terms of metaverse and digital fashion, we were having a coffee, and she was like, "Who is this? All this, who is it for?" There was so much aggressive creation of digital as well. So I think there's an inherent step back that we can take, both in digital and physical, into selecting some things where we can spend more time at looking at. So it's stretching the time and reducing the amount.
Less is more, effectively.
Yes, less is more, and invest the quality there. Because even in digital, it's still very expensive and a lot of time. I mean, now with AI, you can create much faster. But still, it's the operational part is not the creative part of AI. So it's still a lot of manpower and thinking and fashion.
Also for young designers, the cost of a mini show, a little thing, is ridiculous, and it's it's better to invest this money in your business and put in a business structure and get in a great place to work from. And
Who the audience is, who's the audience, who's watching them, and who's it for?
I mean, I think it's quite interesting what you guys wanted to talk a bit about what you do, because you make clothes, but it's not a fashion brand, and there's so much more. I can see guys in the studio who's and it was so interesting to talk to you guys about how you approach creating, and that clothes are just one extension of that way. I don't know if you guys want to come and introduce a bit about what you do.
Sure. Yeah, so my name is Adémidé. I'm a visual artist and designer, and I'm creative director of Abaga Velli, which is I guess we like to call it a cult brand rather than a design brand. It really started from, I guess, a kind of an esoteric thing initially. So it was very much a group, a collective, expressing ourselves, doing kind of drops, but in a very family-oriented way, and just a lot of storytelling. So we did a fashion, I guess, presentation last year for Fashion Week, but even that, we did this film, and it was very much still true to, I guess, our essence. So just kind of adding to what you were saying, I feel like for an independent designer, the fashion show per se is still quite relevant because it's a way to speak to their actual audience. Outside of the public, because I feel like the public is important, but even if you look at the OG Margiela shows and things of that nature, it was very much kind of celebratory of what they were trying to do, and I feel like that's still very relevant. And I guess even the students like the CSM and so forth, that's kind of the energy there.
Yeah, they're your peers, your friends, your family.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess from our perspective, not necessarily doing it within a schedule of the global fashion world, which I understand from a buyer perspective is very important because it allows them to schedule. But for us, we're quite, I guess, not anti-establishment, but we're just a bit kind of moving our own post.
Yeah.
So I guess we kind of we're still going to do things like shows, but they might be more on the end of parties, events, collaborations, things of that nature. Because I do think the physicality of things, especially in this digital era, is rare. So it's nice to have the option to do something very physical.
When you say, are you going to do a show, it's like, well, you don't have to do a show. You can be imaginative and do whatever you want.
Yeah.
You know, it's not the be all and end all. And I hate the idea of people graduating and getting on the hamster wheel. That's the worst thing. You know, the BFC will give you some money and it won't even cover the models.
Yeah.
And so automatically the designers are in debt before they've even started.
And also then it just becomes another show that everyone sees. It doesn't necessarily have a standout. You know, sometimes it does, but it's like, I don't always think that the shows, if you see enough of them, they feel kind of like, you know, it's often the moments, like we were talking about, like the show that the Balenciaga show that was very pared back. That actually, I paid attention to that because it was different from, I was like, oh.
I think restraint can be really
Restraint
impactful.
is really powerful.
Yeah.
Well, I think as the show is a sort of tried and tested formula, it's a framework, and most of us as human beings just like to kind of slot into something that we know works. It's much scarier to sort of say, screw that, I'm going to do something different, I'm going to release a film, I'm going to do a performance. That actually takes a lot of guts, and I don't know how gutsy a generation of young designers is feeling because of the way the world is at the moment. You know, it's kind of, I guess it's always a bit top down. There are some, but then maybe now there is a certain reckoning of like who has the guts to kind of step out of that system, because within that system there's a lot of comfort.
Yeah, but do you know, are you being not gutsy by getting into debt and having a show when you're just starting out and you feel you should be? Do you know what I mean? It's like there's a lot of pressure like that.
Yeah.
And also there's this kind of message that, you know, if you say to students, obviously we're on that page, what do you want to do when you leave college? You know, more they're going to say, I want my own label. No one says, I want to go and get experience at a maison, and you know, which they should do.
Yeah.
You know, I would never recommend that they jump straight into it anyway.
I agree 200%. Why? Because I've been working with young designers, and I'm telling you, the ego is out of control. Ego meaning, why are you doing the show?
Yeah.
To be great with your friends and to be cool and fabulous? Do you want to sell? Do you want a proper brand? Do you understand what branding is? Before you do that, you need to work for someone. You need to humble yourself and see how this machine runs. That's why the Maison Margiela still exists today, because that boy went to Gaultier and did his time. That's why when he came out, even though he came out just as radical as anybody else, it was precise.
That's the thing as well, isn't it? There's no rules.
Yeah.
But just to add to what you said, I always think that it's important to know the rules before you break them to a certain extent. Because for me, I studied tailoring for a very long time before I ever was selling clothes to people. I actually was making clothes for myself since I was a teenager. I actually didn't want to sell. In fact, this is one of the people that convinced me to sell clothes to other people, because I just love clothes, right? And I just want to wear clothes, and I just care about textiles, care about tactile fabrication, I'm obsessed with it, right? But it was never something that I cared about from a monetary perspective initially. I was doing art direction for companies and working with numerous brands, just like making their logos, like brand identity, all these type of things. That was actually my career path, right? So the design thing, per se, in terms of fashion design, really came from a demand of like other my peers that I had cultivated. And initially they wanted me to make stuff for them, and then obviously that evolved to where we're at now. But I definitely agree that I think sometimes when you're so young, you haven't. It's the same thing with music. It's like when you're making music and you haven't experienced anything, it's very difficult to actually put an album out and expect everyone to connect with it. You could be a very good technical like songstress or like a technical writer, but you kind of need life, and I think that sometimes people rush that and they haven't actually experienced life to actually say anything, I feel, as tangible as maybe someone who had gone through the roots work for fashion houses, like really understood, I guess, a concise thing that they're trying to say to the world. So yeah, for me, I always feel like no matter what you're doing, especially in fashion, it's like you should learn, you should find the side that you're interested in, and like for me, it was tailoring. So then even when I wanted to start making like I guess like a hoodie, I approached it from a very technical side, and like the way that I do the darts, so everything is like thought of. Whereas I think that if I was 19, I would have probably approached it very differently. And there's nothing to say that that's worse or this is better, but I just feel more confident now in like what I'm saying. Whereas I do think that sometimes when you're young, especially me when I was young, I was like a rebel without a cause. So I can only imagine the things, if I was like held to that now, and say this was your first collection, I'll be kind of annoyed.
That does freak me out. Like, I've never been a designer, but I can't imagine graduating school and having people like, okay, that's your signature, that's it. I remember I saw Christopher Kane's first show, and I remember being really bowled over by it, and then it changed. Every show changed. He was one of the designer of that period of time. That did change a lot. Each show felt so different.
The MA show.
Yes.
With all the fluorite and the lace and the
And then the
Swarovski.
second one after that with the velvet.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking like, holy, is this the same person?
Yeah.
But I do think there's a lot of pressure on designers to kind of, once you've been successful, you've done something that people resonate with, that you have to do that again.
But we find that even with, I'm going to force you to say something now, Rekha, because Rekha's one of our first year students in the fashion communication course at St Martin's, and there is a real pressure, it seems, that they all feel to have a style.
Like
can you talk to that? Do you feel like that's
absolutely.
true?
It's something, I've struggled with it since in my entire career of being an artist. Ever since I started drawing, I was like, oh, I need a style, and so I'd sit down, and I sort of started off from an illustration perspective, so I would draw things again and again, and try to like develop. If I was drawing a face, I was like, okay, this is my eye, this is my nose. I would literally repeat it, and until I went to like, I guess it was around high school when I was like, that is so stupid, and I just started, I don't know, I guess looking at the people around me and realizing that everybody was doing the same thing, and in that process, by like looking at each other, trying to create the style, they were like losing all creativity. And now, speaking from the college perspective, I find that the style just comes once you're ready to like sort of give up that, I don't know, it's almost like an identity of being, because we were talking about this earlier, like at the beginning of the year, everybody's sort of trying to fit into like a Central St. Martin's sort of way of working, whatever that means. And I had the same issue, and sort of once you start making things for yourself and experimenting, going to museums and sort of finding your own journey, giving away the idea that you need to have a style, it comes naturally. And I was talking to people the other day when we were looking at everyone's work, and they're like, oh my gosh, it's such your style. They were looking at my stuff, and I was like, I have a style? Yeah, you don't even realize it's there, and now you do. And that's even scary for me to hear now, because I'm like, I don't want to get stuck in that. I want to be constantly evolving, and so hopefully by rejecting the notion that you have a style, you can have a more fluid.
It's encouragement. You have to kind of tell. You have to have people around you that are having conversations like this. And I don't think our industry is kind enough to do that. It's not set up to do that, because actually you can make a lot more money by asking someone to slip into a formula. And Christopher Kane's a great example. I mean, what a disaster of a kind of brand in lots of ways for such a talented designer. Yeah. But the kind of horrendous menswear attempt at menswear, and I mean that in the kindest possible way. You just kind of, I felt so frustrated because, why are you doing this? Why are you wasting money, resources, fabric, energy, time on this kind of menswear collection when you're so good at what you're doing? So that's why, I think Christopher Kane's bridal collection is really exciting, because that's where it makes sense. That's where you can kind of really indulge all the things that he's really, really good at.
I think young designers now should start thinking, okay, there's 3 looks I want to do. That could be my collection. Mm-hmm. And then a buyer can come in and say, okay, can we have that in 4 colors? Yeah. Summons down the cost. You don't go crazy and be feeling stressed that you have to do a 30-piece collection when only 25% of it sell. Do your thing, but do it very well, so that people remember you. It's better to sell less first and then graduate into the person you really want to be. But you need the chance to be that person first, not to be thrown to the lions. And at the same time, if you want to be in fashion or if you want to be in costume, say that. Don't come down the runway with 10 Disney outfits and say you want to be in fashion. That ain't fashion. That's costume. But it's okay, because there's a huge huge audience, not audience, but a huge amount of work in Hollywood for that, where you could blow people away. So organize who you want to be, what you want to do. Don't feel pressured up to this big show. The shows, I remember, usually not big shows,
They're always like nice little
Matthew
cool
Williams'
stuff. Yes,
where he did literally 7 outfits.
7 outfits.
And it was great, and everyone just, and the buyers went nuts.
He should have kept doing it.
Yeah.
What year was that?
And it was wasn't a show, it was what, a presentation. Presentations to me are the way
At the
forward.
best, yeah.
Fashion Week is a platform, it doesn't have to be commercial as in selling clothes. I think there's this hideous pressure that designers are under that they've got to sell. It's a bit like you do a great show and all the people that you respect get really excited and engaged by it, and then your mum turns around to you and says, what did you sell? How much have you made?
Yeah.
You know, and it's like you're creating a persona, you're creating a mood or a spirit of something, and you know, you're in charge of your own destiny. You can show once, twice, you can keep going, but Fashion Week is not. That's not the golden egg at the end of the journey.
Also, you think of these young students that are doing this, they can't eat. So somebody has to make some money.
These guys are students, but
they cannot eat. They have no money. They have no money. I hate to say it, and this is really keeping it real. The best ones are very rarely rich. Rich kids. I'm not being rude, but you know, the geniuses need to eat. What can we do? Especially, I mean, coming from the whole British Fashion Council thing, what can we do to support it? Where we allow them to do their thing without the pressure of sale at the moment, just to feel their way and see who they are, and at the same time invite buyers to watch their journey. So eventually, maybe by their 3rd show, they realize who they are, then boom. But they need that support.
I think even you came last year to our studio, and that was
What's your brand?
Abaga Velli. So you came last year to our studio, and just that hour just completely changed the way we thought about things.
Oh, that's great to hear.
Just the review, just the insight.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, literally came as you do, and when you left, me and Addy just looked at each other.
Did you get a biscuit?
Yes, I got made. I got made.
Gave a lobster.
Yeah, exactly.
But me and Addy, we spoke like, okay, cool. Throughout our 10 years of trying to learn our craft to even before present something, we've never even had the opportunity to sit with someone that we respect, or we've only had the opportunity to watch it online. This is why I said it's so valuable for a lot of people to be able to have that access to see things, such as a SHOWstudio, such as these platforms to actually watch, because I didn't know the difference between actually speaking with someone and actually watching online is a complete different ballgame.
Yeah.
So having that feedback was so invaluable to us because it completely changed the way we looked at things. We were still literally on this topic last year, was just like, okay, cool, how do you launch this brand, get visibility, sell, look for collaboration, year 3, sell. Now we've kind of just crunched it back, made the collection a lot more concise, and just introduced or more, as Ade said, I guess a communication process of the art comes first.
If you felt comfortable, it might not be challenging enough. If you feel uncomfortable, it might just be that you don't gel. I mean, sometimes people say, "Oh, I'm with this PR, it's terrible," which is they're just not right for you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think it's just finding people, be collecting characters.
100%.
And I think when you're with the right people, it's a two-way street anyway. Just to know them, and it's a gesture. It started with a gesture.
Really,
It's really interesting that I'm like, do you know what you really need to be good at is on your own with a camera and someone in front of it, make a good picture.
Stripping down.
This is now becoming difficult because there is a certain kind of grandiosity or a sort of scale that everybody wants to work towards, and so you kind of will find that you surround yourself with lots of extra people that you don't need. At the beginning it feels like they're giving you some support, whereas actually maybe you see now with Karen coming in and telling you some truths and that's it, And I think but we otherwise, there is a lot of that kind of almost, it's quite an opulent kind of theatre now where you're like, I've got this person, I've got this team, I've got this assistant. I mean, all of them have got assistants as well.
And I actually feel like they're just being thrown into the fire. Like, that's ridiculous. Like,
that's major shade, but
no, but it's the truth, because for me, I'm someone who comes from that, right? That was actually, I'm more a style person than a fashion person, to be honest with you. So Savile Row, like Neapolitan tailoring, Milanese tailoring, like even to be able to do a hand buttonhole, like these type of things take time and effort. You actually have to learn that. And even that business model, like I know so many tailors all around the world that they travel, do trunk shows everywhere, and their clients are their clients. They have 50 clients and they make more money than all these designers, right? So for me, it's like, you have no idea about the game, like people are doing PTO and all these type of things, but in terms of the actual trade show itself, it's like, these are like heritage, like families of craft, right?
I think the customer wants that from you though.
No, but I hear that, but I feel like you still have to be aware. So it's like literally what you said, like if you're putting this here, and this takes like 30 hours of handcraft, and this is literally made in like a sweatshop / studio in London, whatever, but I just feel like you can't compete, so you have to be self-aware enough to understand that, okay, cool, I need to learn. And I feel like the BFC, to be honest, they should be giving that infrastructure just like they do in Italy, just like they do in like the couture in Paris. It's like, you actually have to learn how to make clothes. Like the ideas are great.
Some people are self-taught though. You hear about successful designers that teach themselves.
I guess it's also tricky. I guess we're it's an oversimplification, but for a customer, if they're both just 2-3 button linen jackets, right? Like, that's as simple as that. And so, sure, one of us might get turned on by the kind of 40 hours it's taken and where the linen seed was grown and la 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 la.
No, but that's the
one
brand.
of us might
That's
not.
the
But whose responsibility, I guess, is what you're touching on, is to communicate that. Because I think
exactly.
it was the press, it was our job, and maybe
That's why the narrative of brand profile is so important.
now it feels like it's your job to have to do that, which I think is a huge pressure, because actually traditionally that was our job, right? You just make the good stuff and we talk about it. Whereas now you've got to talk about it, and I don't know what we do. We just sort of talk about.
We talk about them talking about it.
I mean, Hetty and I talked about this on our thing a while ago. You know, like what's the point of us, and therefore what's the point of the show? Is actually you have to do all of that stuff yourself, that storytelling.
When I first met Karen, she was working at Fred's, which was a very cool members bar at the time, and you know, you probably met a lot of your friendship group.
You know, I do to this day. I did 3 jobs, but I'm a New Yorker. So, you know, I worked at Fred's at night. I did the door at 2 different clubs. And in the daytime, because I came from New York, I said I had to pay my dues. So I worked in the worst hair and makeup agency on the planet, in a basement. But I did it because that's how I got to know every level of what was going on in London. And I have no regrets. I made like £100 a week. 5 days
If you want it badly enough,
you know, you got to pay your dues, but that's why they can't come from you.
You've got to be hungry.
That sounds like that's a difficult thing to say. I think people find that quite sort of outrageous as a statement. And I wonder why that is, right?
I think it's changed as well.
Why do you mean that's?
You've got to find a route. Everyone's got to find a route to midnight.
Well, I think young people kind of maybe partly, I don't know for whatever reason, maybe we can find out in a minute, but I guess that idea of working, you know, all the heat that Kim Kardashian got for her saying just, you know, work. There's an and of course that's within a context
I'm talking about Master of Your Own Destiny.
Yeah.
When stylists used to come in, to take clothes, there was a type of assistant that would always be the assistant, and they'd moan about how they're never going to be a stylist. And then there was a type of stylist that made it happen at weekends, did little shoots, was even honest to the PRs. Would you help me out? I want to do a shoot. Rather than lie and get caught out, you know, and they're the ones that are the editors now.
I think that's
so much I know about hustling.
No, honey, it's not about being fierce.
Yeah.
The fierce lasts for 5 minutes. There's always got to be someone else that's fierce. What else are you bringing?
But also the hustle is different now, because you're talking about a different time period, you know, where you could afford to stay in a city like London. You could kind of.
It was always expensive.
Yeah, but the accoutrements of life today, that you're absolutely, I know what you'll say is like, well, why are you buying flat white every day? But the things that people want.
Shoreditch Town Hall, my 3,000 square foot office when I had no money whatsoever, now the rents in Shoreditch are probably, £50-60 a square foot. It was £2.50 a square foot, I had no money, and I said, I'll take it all. And I couldn't afford that.
Yeah.
You sleep on the floor of the office. I remember when I was doing the PR for Dazed, I had a desk in someone else's office, and at night when they'd all gone home, I'd sleep on the floor, and my skin was so bad, everyone at Dazed used to bitch about me being a coke addict. They thought I was a druggie. because they didn't know that every day all I could afford was a can of Coke and a Twix.
Yeah.
That was my, no, it was, I'm happy, that was my choice. I had to find a way to make it work. Obviously I did the whole sofa surfing with friends, but you run out.
Yes.
I mean, mentorship is obviously really important, but it's also quite hard to mentor when the industry has changed so much.
Yeah.
So, for example, for me, we were talking about working for free before. I did like really short internships for free that don't exist now in magazines because they now pay, which is great. But we're kind of in this grey area at the minute where they just now it's really hard to get an internship at all because actually a lot of companies just cut them. They didn't start paying, so it is difficult. And I'm learning more and more to mentor in a way that's maybe a little bit more zoomed out than giving specifics, like you should reach out to this company and try and do this thing. It's more make friends with everybody you see, get everybody's contact details, don't take no for an answer, keep reaching out on LinkedIn. But yeah, so it is difficult because I think that young people today are in a completely different industry. And I mean, I only came up like 6 years ago.
It's not long ago.
Wasn't that long ago.
In my mind,
even still, it's crazy like the difference. And also they've got new threats to them. I mean, in the journalism sphere more, but I've got students, like sometimes I teach at LCF and I've got students putting their hands up and saying, is AI going to replace fashion journalism?
You're like, yep, probably.
You know, and I'm stood there like, I don't think so, I hope not. But I mean, who am I to say? And, you know, it's a completely different world, so we can mentor them in the sense of, you know, imparting those more like life, like soft skills, but also, you know, when the industry's changing so much that we have to be mindful that they're not coming up in the same world that we did.
Well, mentorship goes both ways, right? You're getting mentored by your mentees and vice versa, so I imagine it's both.
Good mentorship, the person doing the mentoring is inspired by the designer. I mentor Matty Boven, and actually, you know, I think my most important job with him is helping him make his own decisions. I mean, I don't want to influence him in any way, but what I can give to him is help him make informed decisions.
Are the universities being honest about the churn? Because initially after Brexit, we had a whole opportunity for onshoring, especially around COVID.
What does that mean?
For bringing business manufacturing to the UK, and people such as Patrick Grant were telling me that they had an 83, no, Make It British said there was an 83% uplift in the wish to onshore business. Meanwhile, people like Patrick Grant were saying, I can't fill the gaps because a lot of the training had been lost in these core skills. Yeah. And the Lithuanian women who were primarily propping up UK manufacturing left. Now, even though people like myself or other organisations have said to the government, please speed up the necessary T levels to skill these people up, they won't be rolled out until September of this year. So there was a gap between Brexit, a wish for onshoring, those people found other solutions, and now there's not this 83% uplift of people wanting to onshore. And people have got around the fact that maybe they don't want to go to China because they don't want to travel long distances and gone to Portugal or to Lithuania or to wherever. So there are all these other jobs, as has been said, within this industry, and they don't have the name and lights glamour that costs a fortune and is like playing poker with your future, but they do have a job. And I think I'm just very nervous that we're not telling the truth. Okay, we're not telling the truth because I love the industry, and I also lived in a housing co-op to prop up being a stylist, and my family were like, really? You know, and took a risk when I launched Fashion Roundtable as well, because that was an idea. I rang Karen, from... no, who's Sharon? I don't even know. Sharon was my boss at Parliament. She was the MP I worked for. And Karen was the first person I told, and she said, yes. You've got to do this. And so, you know, there is an element of bravery around lots of different people for lots of different reasons, but are we telling them the truth? And I'm worried, from my observation of the level of churn, that we're not telling the truth.
What do you mean? What are they not being told?
Because to be a designer and to hold your place and to make money, which means you're successful.
I think they know.
Especially in a time when we've got to navigate the sustainability conversation in much greater depth than we are.
But I think they're brought up to think like that. It's much easier for this generation.
Yeah. I wish I could do that because I want to work. I want to do.
So you want more experience.
I want more experience. I think even in summer, especially in summer, not during term time because. especially now in summer, 3 months, what am I going to do other than what I want to do, what I love to do?
I think what you're touching on though is something we notice a lot with a younger generation. Is they kind of want some of the war wounds. They want it to be
you listen to
harder.
us talk about our war stories.
They kind of want it to be hard, you know, like, because there's things that like, oh, someone threw a phone at me.
I was loving
Someone threw a phone at me. It was like 4 a.m. You kind of want, right? You kind of want your boss to be a thing.
I don't know if you want the phone. I don't know.
Well, you don't want the, no one should want the phone. But like, listen, I've always said this, and I'm going to repeat myself. Devil Wears Prada is a documentary. It's not a work of fiction, right? So the people kind of want that. They kind of want that because again, the joy of this industry is it's all of the characters, it's all of the kind of late nights, and sort of and what's interesting is Tamara's talked so much about protecting people, and the protections that's coming in, the legislation that's coming in is taking maybe some of that.
I'm not sure if it's protecting people or if it's protecting the companies.
Yeah, maybe.
You're a mentor with re-mentoring, aren't
Yeah, I mentor a lot now and then. I can get on a Zoom with someone and they can say all the things that probably worry them. And in one Zoom, they got it. Because I break it down.
Can I call you later? Maybe we can set that up.
No, but this is because it's because I've been put in all these situations. I started working with Andre Walker in Paris, and I would pay for my own ticket to go to Paris, and I would be there for a month, and I would get up at 8, and I wouldn't get back until 2 in the morning. And when I tell you, I loved every second of it. I was making the food. I was sweeping, as both of you. I was doing faxes then. That's how old I am. And then when the couturiers would come in and show what they've done with his ideas, he would actually ask my opinion. Because of the way I wore his clothes, he wanted me there. Because I wore them so differently from the way he designed them. So I came from a designer's
And that made you feel good about yourself at that stage.
And he didn't have to, but he still did. And after that, I still went and swept the floor, and I was there until 2 in the morning, doing envelopes and all of that. I did it for like 5 seasons. I paid my own way. I even bought the breakfast sometimes because I wanted to know how to run a house. And I'll tell you something, they can't come for me on that. Like I could walk into any place and know exactly how to make it work. That's what you want. That's what I say about experience. And I didn't have the money, but I worked the 3 jobs and saved my money and went to Paris. I think everybody should have that chance to not to have pressure to become the designer tomorrow. Maybe they want to break after they graduate. Go work for someone. See how it runs.
But also, I think when you do internships, I was very aware of this. There was a point, I think it was in around 2005, 2007.
Oh, one before you finished?
Sorry,
I was 32 when I did it. So, if you're 25, get a life. Get it together.
You got time. You could see almost immediately which ones were going to.
Really?
Almost immediately which ones were going to go up that because it wasn't that they were willing to do anything, although that was part of it. Not anything, but within their job they were open and eager to do what needed to be done. But it was just the way they were, to your point, looking around, seeing going and talking to the fashion director and going and getting coffee for the editor if it was asked. I mean, there was this, I remember just watching it. It was like really fascinating. I mean, it would be like 1 out of 100 each time. 1 out of 100, maybe 1 out of 80. And they'd come through and I'd be like, oh, yep, there's one. And it was just like, what is it about that? And I don't think it necessarily is about working for free, although that was the definition of paying your dues in the olden days. I think it was also just that attitude of helpfulness. How can I help what's happening?
We need actual people that are creative, and what we can offer is, I guess, the business side, the relationship building side. I almost feel is there no bridge between that in terms of responsibility from the people above to be able to kind of teach students listen, it's not just this industry you can learn this. It's very transferable. Because that's how I guess me and Addy learned from working in multiple industries. And I'm 31 myself, and I've worked from just doing all types of jobs. I've been a driver, I've cleaned. For me, my inspirations, I have a son, so there ain't no kind of job that I'm not going to do to bring food home for the people I feel responsible for. And I still have a passion, a dream that I want to do. So I'm going to get it regardless, whether it is I do my hours of this, and then I'm still going to get my 6-7 hours in, because I don't believe in telling people lose sleep, because if you lose sleep, you're not going to have the energy to actually drive. So still manage to get your rest in, but I still make sure I have time for my passion and learning the craft, because it gives me fulfillment. So it's just about learning to adapt that and just, look, there's no shame in doing the stuff to pay your bills. It's hard out here, you know what I mean? You don't have to walk around pretending and do we're all in the same boat, pretending, and at the end of the day. So I don't know whether it's we're saying we need to speak the truth. It's about just being honest or showing people that, look, the skills are very much transferable. It's not just the fashion industry you're going to learn, or the things that's going to make you successful.
You're very right.
Also, there's about 100 jobs within the fashion industry.
Exactly.
You can still be in fashion without having the pressure of being the person on top.
But
you can work with them. You know what I mean? You can be on the team. It's about being a team player. Not everybody should be McQueen. They can't.
I think this is all part of where I'm talking about the kind of great lie at the heart of this. So I think the threads I've picked up from this, I think you're spot on about British style versus London fashion.
Mm-hmm.
The price point thing I think is really important. The fact that London has become hideously expensive for lots of people, and talent and creativity are very difficult. So for instance, to live in London in the late 80s, early 90s meant you could squat. Stephen Jones lived in a squat. Boy George lived in the same squats on Warren Street. Can you imagine now living in squats on Warren Street? It would be nigh on impossible. So there was all this fertility, East London was cheap. East London is no longer cheap. Margate has become arguably East London, randomly. So then what happens? But then you're displacing with gentrification the people from that community. You talked about McQueen. We used to ring his mum to get the clothes when I interned at Vogue, because Isabella Blow was pushing him on us. And he lived at his mum's and he was signing on. That's no longer an option. So I don't underestimate how difficult it is for working class people from all backgrounds to have access to the stability that is needed to even be able to think about what they want to do. And the hybridisation of music, art, fashion into this creative melting pot, because honestly, and I know I'm old, okay, and I know that therefore I'm not out and about like I was, but I don't feel this London vibrancy that I did, and it's not just my age, it's because it's so expensive. So then what happens to creativity in a hyper-corporate world? How do you navigate that? And it comes back to style, because style is the quintessence actually of what British fashion I think is. Look at Nick, who just came in with, he always wears the same shirt, you know where you are with Nick and what he's wearing, he's immaculate. Of course the crusts had to come off the cucumber sandwiches, we're served nice tea, it's all very elegant, and that's very British. But then the polarity of that is hyper new churn London fashion. And I'm interested in the conflict between those two, because I think there is a conflict in attention.
Yeah. I also think there is growth happening, but it's not happening necessarily at London Fashion Week.
Exactly.
I spotlight so many brands that start in bedrooms in Manchester, in Newcastle. Like there's a brand called Represent, based in Manchester. They turned over 50 million last year, and it's two lads who started printing t-shirts in their bedrooms. They showed at Fashion Week a couple of times, but much later, just as something to do because they could. But they didn't need Fashion Week. They didn't need a show.
They don't need it.
And there's Cowboys of Habit as well. She's a girl in Newcastle. She's literally in her mum and dad's living room, but Kendall Jenner's wearing her tops, and she can't stock them fast enough. So it's like. Actually,
who was that?
Cowboys of Habit. It's that Chodha Cowboys vest. Have you seen? She does really
another designer like that.
Yeah, and so I think actually there is growth.
But she broke in just through Instagram.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. It's all social media. They start super small in a shed. They don't grow too quickly because they can't. And we're seeing loads of creativity and loads of growth actually. But also it's a price point thing as well. Yeah. Like you look at any brand that has done really well in the last decade, Jacquemus, Copernic. They're all contemporary price point. No one can thrive in high-end luxury as an emerging designer, I don't think, anymore.
The only way the government will understand the power of it is if they understand the freeze analogy, that big business invests in art And because that's their mindset is big. Is they've been consultants at Goldman Sachs, so unfortunately they're hedge fund and investment guys who understand that level of data.
I think this is the problem. We're not valuing the artisan.
And when they're gone, they're gone.
Exactly, and it's actually something so interesting to look at in terms of a Western culture versus Eastern culture. My dad used to work in Japan for a long time, and the one thing that he really noticed was
they bought our
how
denim
much they,
salvage.
exactly, and how much the Japanese or particularly Eastern cultures, I'm not as informed on it, but particularly in Japan, they really value craft and those
That's what
that
you were
make
saying about
those
Ms.
things for years.
Which is like Hermes quality. People don't realise it.
It's a very good point. Some cultures just are much
So
more.
there's the Heritage Craft Association, which is run by Daniel Carpenter, and the King is the president, have a red endangered list of crafts. The issue is if you start using the word craft, people go, oh.
Yeah, I think I think
but craft is vital to this industry. Embroidery, tapestry, this beautiful piece of.
Do you know why that is though? Let's be really clear.
Lace making. We've got one lace maker.
It's female. Often, craft is led by female. Not always, obviously, but I think that's where we distinguish often fashion and. Or like, let's say craft and art is often the distinguishing factor is class, gender, all kinds of things.
A lot of people in fashion, they do tend to move outside London, and they manage their time where they come into London maybe once a month or once every 2 weeks. But what's really interesting is that their time management for that day in London is so brutal. It's amazing. They get everything done, and they're mentally focused to really. I think there's different ways suit different people, but I'm always aware, especially with internet, everything, I could live anywhere and still do the same job. I'm sure of it. I just love being here.
Yeah.
Do you think then this is interesting how you say like a lot of people in fashion now like have one day, like in a month or maybe a week, and as creatives we're all, we can be inspired by pretty much anything that's around us. Do you think because London is so busy, maybe it kind of like creates even more noise to our creativity, and so that's why a lot of people in fashion have gone, do you know what, I'm going to go away for a while. It's like an effervescence.
Everyone, it's a sum of all the parts. I think that, the people that have nothing, they're proven to be the most successful. I see it so much. I think there's a lot of camaraderie in London, there's a lot of synergy between them, there's a lot of support between the students, helping each other. When I look at IB, Campbell Addy, Gareth, Wrighton, what they achieve through their friendship and support with each other, it kind of underpins their survival in a way. Yeah. I appreciate everything you're saying, Tamara, but I feel like you need to spend more, I wish you'd spend more time on the ideas for the solutions, because I know you've got them. And I know that you do a lot of canvassing with the right people, but we know there's an issue. We know there's always been an issue. A lot of these issues have always existed. London's always been expensive as long as I've been here.
It's grown significantly.
I think it's
grown significantly.
Yeah. The world at the moment is in a very difficult position, and obviously that I work with politicians and I work around policy a lot, and I think we are in a populist era where big shiny noise cuts through, and I think that the industry hasn't worked out some of the key solutions that I believe it needs to understand. How can you have sustainable growth? That's an oxymoron. And I haven't got the answer to that one, and I certainly can't workshop that on my own. I think therein is the problem. Sustainability and growth are not necessarily the same thing.
Yeah.
So how do you look at different models? How do you look at different propositions? Are they being taught? I don't even think they're being taught.
They're not being taught at my university.
Yeah.
I study at London College of Fashion. I study fashion PR and communication. And actually, funnily enough, you mentioned sustainability and growth. There was a lecture that was given to us last September.
But I feel very, very engaged in all these issues because of who I follow on social media. I feel very informed. I'm picking up my news. I read all the papers after midnight every night. I can cut through the noise because I'm looking at all sides of it. And I see all these issues, but don't you think that, you know, someone who's about to graduate and they're wondering about being sustainable, they can find it all online to help them understand what they need to do, or they can go to forums where they can find the answers?
I think the graduating...
Or is that just me being very naive?
No, I think the graduating class, though, there are often a lot of people coming out of school, and I don't think this is true of everywhere. I'm going myself to lecture actually about, not lecture, okay, let's talk about that. But to talk about what are the considerations, because I think that's where let's start there. But I think a lot of fashion design students particularly are much more aware than certainly they would have been 5 years, 10 years ago. I think the missing link, and I think you're right to some degree, that there are these kind of gaps, right, between what we say is happening and what's actually happening. But I think there's an opportunity also there. I'd like to be more, I feel more optimistic, positive, because
that's how I feel when you see these
I work with
things.
Yeah, I work with a lot of brands.
You get excited about what you could do, which is why, you know, thank goodness we've got you there. It's true. It's true.
And I'm
just wish you'd be a bit more positive about it. You do make a difference.
It's not that I'm not positive, it's that I feel that there needs to be a huge reset, and I think that we need to understand that the runaway train is a runaway train, and then talk about the opportunities. I would really like to see investment in these manufacturing and the skills. I would love to bring more production back to the UK. I really would.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like, I'm flabbergasted that Brexit wasn't the opportunity to do that, because it was a clear...
That's what they said it was about?
Well, I think they've said lots of things, but yes, I think it's a clear need for investment, and I would like to see more people pushing for that, and I think that the bigger names should be pushing for this, because otherwise you offshore the problem, and we've all seen where that leads. Yeah. And I would like to see that, and I'm very excited when I look at this tablecloth. I'm very excited by this tablecloth because it's beautiful. It's a heritage piece with lots of skills in it. Somebody sat there. This looks like to me it was done by hand. This might have been done by machine.
I've got one that my great-grandmother made for me. It looks a lot like this.
So those kinds of things excite me. This piece
but
of
also,
Westwood,
you know, you could say that at Royal College of Art they've got the most incredible tech department. And one of the things that I think is incredible is that the fashion department mixes with the tech department and they collaborate. And you see all these new...
I'm interested in how we build regenerative gardens and create the dyes that go into the denim, so that when my husband's worn his jeans for 10 years, he can put them on the compost heap and it can go back into the... I'm interested, I'm there now. That's where I'm interested. And I really want to see us bringing more manufacturing back to the UK. I think it's got to stop the offshoring.
I still don't understand why there hasn't actually been any investment through the British Fashion Council in factories.
That's their job.
It's the big gaping hole that has always been there.